Israel is going to temporarily take over the Gaza Strip in order to crush Hamas and to release the hostages. There's been a lot of talk about what that looks like. Is that the right thing to do? And so forth. There's a whole panel of discussion and debate that's going on right here on the Piers Morgan Show. But have you seen Brooke Goldstein? Brooke Goldstein is an amazing advocate, very articulate, and really lays out the issues very clearly. So let's watch this clip together and then talk about it. But first, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Check this out.
Let me start with you, Gershon Basket, if I may. Israel has always said from the start of this war that it had two main goals. One was to get the hostages released, and the second was to defeat Hamas. As we talk nearly 2 years later now, neither of those things have so far been achieved. With this dramatic escalation that is apparently coming from Prime Minister Netanyahu to basically take over the entire Gaza Strip, which is due to be ratified tomorrow night with an emergency cabinet meeting. If that was to happen, do you think it makes it more or less likely that the remaining hostages will be released?
Look, Piers, from the very beginning of the war, these two goals stated by Netanyahu are contradictory to each other. They could never have been accomplished at the same time. It's either bring the hostages out or destroy Hamas. And there is no way for Israel to destroy Hamas entirely militarily. The destruction of Hamas will ultimately be politically done when there is an alternative to a Hamas government in Gaza. And an extension of the war now to surround the remaining 20% of what's there, where some 2 million people are crowded in, will be a disaster for Gaza, will be a disaster for the hostages, will weaken the Israeli army and put the country of Israel at threat from its neighbors, because the army is already exhausted after almost 2 years of warfare. Reserve soldiers have been spending 200, 300 days in duty now. They cannot do more. This is very bad for Israel. It's very bad for the Palestinians. It's bad for the world, and it needs to end. And the only person who can end it is President Trump.
The people who support this say that the only way to get the hostages out is to defeat Hamas. What do you say to that?
Those are the very same people who have been telling us from the beginning of the war that military pressure will release the hostages, when we know as a matter of fact that the military pressure has killed hostages. There are hostages that have been killed by Israeli bombing. There are hostages that have been executed by Hamas when Israeli soldiers were approaching tunnels. This is a sure plan, 100% plan to get the remaining hostages killed. They will either die from starvation or be executed by Hamas or killed by Israeli soldiers.
Okay, Goldstein, you're pulling faces there, but this is somebody who's an experienced Israeli hostage negotiator. Why would you think you know better than he does?
Well, you're putting words in my mouth, Piers, to start. I haven't even begun speaking, and you're telling me that I think I know better than him. But I'm just listening to the absurdity.
Well, you were smirking at it with respect. Brooke, with respect, you were smirking at his responses. So yeah, I'm drawing conclusions that you were finding them worthy of a smirk. So that's why I questioned you.
Okay. Hamas is entirely responsible for whether the hostages live or die. They are Hamas's hostages. Hamas kidnapped them. Hamas killed their family. Hamas took them, and they're using them as hostages. To have this sort of like perverse morality play where Israel now is responsible. If Israel goes and tries to rescue them, Israel is the one who's responsible for killing them, I think only plays into the hands of Hamas. You know, what we have here in Gaza is a situation that I think is being overcomplicated by politics and hatred for Israel. You have an Islamist terrorist group, the same as ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Islamic Jihad, that has spent the last almost 20 years building a terrorist state and the largest subterranean terrorist compound in order to use its own civilians as human shields in a war to destroy Israel. On October the 7th, Hamas's goal was to work together with Hezbollah in the north and terrorist proxies in the east to overtake Israel. Thank God that didn't happen. Hamas attacked Israel, and that is why we are where we are today. Now, Hamas knows that it cannot defeat Israel on the battlefield. No one can really defeat Israel on the battlefield. So what it has done instead is perpetrated this propaganda campaign where it wants the world to believe that Israel is responsible for the situation of the Gazan people. Now you have a situation in the north of Gaza and a situation in the south of Gaza that couldn't be more opposite from each other. In the north, Hamas is in control. It uses food as a weapon against its own people. It has no money anymore, so the way that it's paying its fighters is through food. And the way that it controls the population is by withholding food from them and then reselling the food to the population at exorbitant prices. It then stages all of these propaganda photos and these scenes that it then sells to the media abroad, because Hamas will not allow, and Israelis cannot guarantee the security of any journalists that come into northern Gaza. And all you have to do is talk to people like Hamza Hawidi, who is a Gazan journalist, who is there, who speaks the truth all the time and tells you what it's like to be a journalist in northern Gaza. Contrast that to the south, where we have the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which Hamas is daily attacking and shooting rockets at and killing the people who are distributing aid to the Palestinian Gazans in the south. And there's no food shortage there. Now, what is so appalling to me is that the world is preventing Gazans from leaving. Why is it in any other conflict? You know, in the conflict, for example, in the Ukraine, we had 8 million people flee. In the conflict in Syria, we have 7 million people flee. But those who pretend to care about the lives of Palestinian Gazan civilians are refusing to allow even the women and children to be temporarily relocated, so they cannot be used as hostages and they cannot be used as human shields by Hamas. This to me is the most sickening and despicable thing, because the world does not care about the lives of Gazans. They want them to be used as human shields and propaganda, because they want to turn around and then blame Israel and accuse Israel of war crimes, when it is clear that Hamas is entirely responsible for this war. If Hamas did not attack Israel on October the 7th, they would be still in power, unfortunately, in Gaza.
One of the questions is that they lob out, at the same time they lob out the term genocide, and that Israel's committing a genocide, and they'll say that Israel has, you know, a superior army, military, air force, everything that it has is much more superior than Hamas, and that is true. So then why is the war taking a year and a half long? Because they're being put in an impossible situation where they're trying as hard as humanly possible to not kill any civilians in a very urban area where terrorists purposely put themselves into the civilian areas. Even with this whole food distribution, it's there, the terrorists go and they cause as much chaos and wreak as much havoc as possible, shooting firearms into the air, making people nervous and running and bringing chaos and confusion to the situation. And that has led, unfortunately, to some terrible results. But it's the terrorists embedding themselves among the civilian populace that is the root of the problem. If Israel wanted to just genocide the whole Gaza, this war would have been over in about a week after October 7th. The superiority of Israeli forces over Hamas they're incomparable. The reason that it's taking so long is because Israel is trying to be so careful in only going after terrorists, not getting any civilians involved, which is very, very difficult in a densely populated area where the terrorists purposely will embed themselves. And then go cry to a very willing, open Western media that Israel is killing civilians every time one civilian is killed. My wife and I follow the different hostage deals that have been coming through the pipeline over the past year and a half, and there's a deal and Hamas backs out, and there's another deal and Hamas backs out. Hamas has no reason to make a deal. The hostages are literally the only valuable thing that they have at this point in time. There's no reason to make a deal. They don't care about their own civilians. They don't want this war to stop. They have all the international organizations and international media on their side. This is how they're fighting their war. They want to prolong this thing as much as possible. There's no reason for them to stop. They need to be forced out, leave in disgrace. They're not doing that. There's no way that they can fight back in Israel. The only thing that they have is willing international organizations and international media. And until people wake up and realize that this war is going to keep continuing on and on, all the talk, and it's going to keep going, guys. Nevertheless, we can and should continue praying that this war ends very soon, that Hamas surrenders, goes into exile, releases all the hostages, and that we can start rebuilding in a good and peaceful, lasting future for everyone in the region. If you like this content overall, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Take care.